Alright, in this video let's learn about components events in Svelte. So far we have learned about props, that is passing data from the parent component to the child component. Sometimes though you might also want to communicate from the child component back to the parent component. This is where custom events come into picture. Let's understand the syntax and usage in this video. For our example, we are going to consider the scenario of implementing a pop-up. Of course, to keep it simple, we will not create a pop-up component with all the styling and markup. We will create a simple div tag with some content and assume it as a pop-up component. Let me explain the scenario before we dive into the code. In our app, we have the app component. This component will have a button to open the pop-up. The pop-up is a simple component with an if block to conditionally display it in the browser. So on click of this button, we will show the pop-up component. In the pop-up component, we will have some text and a close button. On click of the close button, we have to hide the pop-up component. Straightforward requirements. So let's head over to VS Code and implement this. Let's begin by creating a new file in the component folder. The file name is popup.svelte. For the markup, add an s2 tag that says this is a pop-up. After the text, let's also add a button whose text is close pop-up. Let's include this pop-up component in app component. So in the script section, import pop-up from ./components/popup.svelte. And in the markup, add the component as a custom HTML tag pop-up. At this point of time, the pop-up will always be visible. Let's add a variable to conditionally render it. Let's show pop-up is equal to false and then wrap the component with an if block where the expression depends on show pop-up being true. So curly braces, hash, if show pop-up and then close the if block. Since show pop-up is initialized to false, the pop-up is hidden on page load. Let's add a button to set show pop-up to true. So before the if block, add a button. The text is going to be show pop-up, and on click of this button, you are going to have an arrow function where we set show pop-up is equal to true. If we now save the file and head to the browser, we have the button being displayed. I click on the button and the pop-up component is displayed. The component has an s2 tag and a button. Now what we want is on click of this button, hide the pop-up. We know that to hide the pop-up, we need to set show pop-up to false. However, the property is present in the app component, whereas the close button is present in the pop-up component. So what we have to do is to send a message from the pop-up component to the app component asking the app component to set show pop-up value to false. And the way we do that is using custom events. Let's see how. In the pop-up component, we begin by importing a function from the Svelte library. So add a script tag and import from Svelte create event dispatcher after importing. We call the function. As the name indicates, the function creates an event dispatcher. So let's assign the result of calling this function to a constant called dispatch. The dispatch function can now be utilized to send events from this pop-up component to the parent component, which in our case is the app component. So on click of this close pop-up button, we are going to dispatch the close event. We can name this event anything we want, but close seems appropriate for our pop-up. Now that we are emitting an event from this pop-up component, let's listen to it in the app component. To listen to the close event, we again use the on directive. So on colon, but this time the event is a custom event instead of a DOM event. And the event name is close. As a handler, we are going to set show pop-up to false. So when the child component emits the close event, we are setting show pop-up to false, as simple as that. If we now go back to the browser, click on show pop-up, the component is displayed. And if I click on close pop-up, the component is hidden. This is pretty much how you communicate from the child component to the parent component through custom events. Now there is one point I would like to make note of regarding dispatching events from a component. At the moment, we don't have to send any data to the parent with a custom event, but you might come across such a scenario. So let me quickly show you how to pass data along with the event. In the pop-up component to dispatch, we specify a second argument which would be the data. It could be any data like a string, object, and so on. But let's simply send a string value Rahul as the data for this example. Now in the app component, let's move the close event handler to a function. Call the function as close pop-up, and this function now receives an argument which is the event object. In the function body, set show pop-up to false, and then to access the data we are sending from the pop-up component, we need to access event.detail. Let's simply log that to the console. On close is now going to be equal to close pop-up. If we now go back to the browser, open the console, open the pop-up and click on close pop-up, you can see Rahul in the console. This is the data we sent from the child to the parent component. Alright, to summarize custom events, import the createEventDispatcher function in the child component and obtain the dispatch function by calling it. Using the dispatch function, emit an event by passing in an event name and any event data. In the parent component, listen to the custom event using the on directive and assign the appropriate handler. The data can be retrieved using event.detail. Alright, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and I'll see you guys in the next video.